activism for me is as simple as providing a safe space for people. I think often it can feel so like consuming. Just looking at America itself, you don't have to get into other countries before you start feeling like, oh my God, there's too much to try to fix. And so sometimes I have to reel it back and be like, how can I help someone right in front of me today?
Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Michael Franti here, and welcome to the Stay Human podcast. I'm very excited to have this duo on with me today because their music is amazing, first of all, and just very, very unique. And I just want to give a big shout out, first of all, to Pack Clothing for sponsoring this week's episode of the Stay Human podcast. Packed, if you don't know them, go and check out their website. They do amazing designs, incredible clothes, and everything in their supply chain, from the cotton that's grown all the way up to the labor and delivery. That sounds like you're having babies. But through the labor process and the way that it gets to you, I should say, is incredible. It's all done as an organic, sustainable, and fair trade as possible. So check out Packed. Our guests today are a mother-daughter powerhouse duo rooted in hip-hop royalty that is the Wu-Tang Clan. Together, they are pioneers, becoming the very first artists to journey from hip-hop to country and planting new roots in Nashville. After moving to Music City, the pair created their own stripped-down hybrid country Americana style with a diverse range of musical influences, including Chris Stapleton, Fleetwood Mac, the Judds, and Motown. Please welcome to the podcast Takitha and Prana Supreme of O.N.E The Duo, or O.N.E The Duo. How are you guys doing?
What an intro.
Yeah.
We're doing so good. Thanks for having us.
Well, you know, that intro just sparked so much curiosity for me about the life that you both have lived, and that's what this show is all about. I really believe that there's no one that you wouldn't love if you knew their story. So I want to hear about where you guys, came from. Takitha, I'm going to start with you since you're mom, and just tell me about your life and how you grew up.
Well, I was born in Stockton, California, but raised in Sacramento. So I'm a Californian.
You're raised right around the corner from me. I was born in Oakland, and raised in Davis.
Oh, wow.
I know the Central Valley. I know that heat in the summertime. It's like,
oh my God, the valley
like 180 degrees there right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So I spent my childhood in Northern California, and in Sacramento specifically is where I learned everything that I know about being, about, humanity, about family, about friends, about friendship. I was an athlete the majority of my life, from 4 years old up until I got out of high school. I was a professional gymnast. I was a gymnast. And for the 1992 games, I was my city's Olympic hopeful for the Barcelona games. So I really come from an athletic background, more so than music. I wasn't the child who had the hairbrush in the mirror singing, hoping to be a star. I was it was in the gym 6-7 days a week training. So just a little backstory from my childhood. I'm the firstborn to teen parents. My mother and father were high school sweethearts, and had me at 16 and 17 years old. My father was 16, my mom was 17, and raised me together until they split ways when I was around 13 years old. But the bulk of my childhood was really kind of wrapped around family and my grandparents, my cousins. My cousins are more like siblings to me, even to this day. My aunts and uncles are extremely close to me as well. So I grew up with a very strong sense of family and the importance of family. And because of my mother and how I was raised, and because of her influence, I also grew up with a very strong sense of service and humanitarianism. And that it is actually our responsibility to look out for one another, whether they're blood or not, that we are really part of one family, the human family. So that's why I was very excited to meet you today and to be on this podcast, just because of everything that you represent about, humanitarianism and thinking about not just the community, but the world around you, the world at large. So just a little backstory to where I'm from and who I am, truly, beyond the music.
That's beautiful. You know, growing up as I want to talk about you being an athlete because I also was that same way. I grew up being just immersed in sports and basketball. And for me, that was a way to process everything that was happening in my life. It was like when things weren't going right at home, I would just stay out late and shoot baskets. And then I'd go to school the next day and I'd play and people go, oh, you know, you're good. Like you improved. And it was like some acknowledgement for me. And that sort of drove me. But I also found something inside me that was like, oh, I can't really dribble with my left hand. So I'm going to spend hours just focusing on that. And then, oh, now I'm better. Now I got that. And it gave me this like drive and determination that I've carried out through my whole life.
Yes.
How was it for you being a gymnast? I mean, that's a tough sport.
It's a tough sport. It takes 110% dedication. I can relate to you and what you're saying about discovering your weakness through your sport and using that to kind of check that and decide to work on that and strengthen that thing instead of it just being something like, oh, well, too bad. I'm just going to dribble with my right forever. You know what I mean? Like, and with gymnastics, it's the same way because it's an individual team sport. You know what I mean? Like there's so much more built on the individual than it is about being a team player. That you are really forced to recognize your strengths and your weaknesses because you want to make sure that you can exceed to, well, if you're a perfectionist, you want to make sure you can get to the top tier, right? So you have to be very honest with yourself about that, which I carried that into my life. You know, I'm an analyzer. I'm going to analyze myself before I'm going to project onto someone else. You know, I'm going to look at what I can do better in every degree, rather than saying, well, you could be doing this better to make my life easier. You know, so that's one thing that kind of translate from gymnastics to life. And then also one of the main things that I learned through gymnastics that I apply in my everyday life is projecting what you want. In gymnastics, there would be parts of our training, you know, we train at least 6.5 hours a day, 6 days a week, and sometimes 7 if you have a private with the coach, right, with the coaching staff. Yeah. And one of the things that we would have to do, along with our rotations of vault bars being floor, there'd be one empty rotation where you have to sit and go through your routines in your mind until you never fall in your mind. Like you have to perfect that routine in your mind first, and you're projecting that thing to happen. By the time you get on the event, it's kind of like muscle memory, but it's mental muscle memory. You know, you're knowing before you perform that trick or you throw that trick that it has to be the way that you see it in your mind, and that's how you can execute it. Not to mention that you've trained for it. You know what you're supposed to do. Your body is intact and it's tight, and you know exactly where you're supposed to be. That also prevents you from injury. I ended up kind of using that in my life as well. When I want things to happen or I'm trying to, music is tricky too, because there's so many things at play that have to work for you to complete a song or for you to get the song released or for you to get to perform the song on stage. There's so many other people that need to kind of participate and collaborate for that to happen, which is not like gymnastics. But I still had to use the same method of projecting what I wanted, you know, and not look at, maybe the challenge or the shortcoming or fear specifically. Fear is a huge one for me. Having to really decide, no, it doesn't matter what the light is telling you or what the day is telling you. All that matters is what you are actually trying to execute and what you're trying to project to have happen. And I have to, besides the Most High blessing me and gifting me with the opportunity to do these things, I have to put a lot of that, credit to my ability to see directly through to the thing that I need to have happen instead of the obstacle that's in front of me. And I put that on me. I don't look at the world working against me when it's not happening. I'm looking at what do I need to adjust to get around this obstacle, or what kind of discipline do I need to have to remove these things that are blocking me from the thing that I desire,
That's really powerful to be that kind of to have that kind of self-analysis and just be able to look and go, whoa, rather than look at it like, oh, I've never done this, so it's impossible. Saying, I've never done this, and how am I going to get there? Prana, when you hear your mom speak that way, what does that make you feel?
Man, I feel like we always talk about, I shouldn't say always, but we've often talked about mom's career as a gymnast, because I tried to be an athlete and it was not for me. But there's so many times when she talks about like dedication that she had to give to that sport that just reminds me that just because I'm not an athlete, that doesn't mean that I can't have that same kind of dedication and persistentness to my artistry. And so it's just like, I don't know, it's inspiring. Like my mom is like my hero. Like both of my parents are like the single most important people to me. It's like my parents and my grandma. And every time that they're saying something, I'm always trying to like absorb as much as I can. And like I used to, when I was a kid, actually, I used to write journal entries and I'd like label them under like dad, mom, yaya, and I'd like write down like little things they would tell me and quotes they would say. 'Cause I'm like, I'm not getting this at all. And so even right now sitting here, I'm like, that's so real. Like that's really the stuff that mom had taught me as a kid of like, hold it in your mind. Like what, perception is reality. So if you're feeling like, okay, I'm going to get on that stage and I'm going to perform my best, then that's what's going to happen. Which is why often when we have performances and like, we just feel like we didn't have as many rehearsals as we wanted, or like we're burnt out because we've been doing interviews and meetings and studio sessions. And I always say, I'm like, in my mind, we've already gone on stage and we've already killed it. So like, I'm good. I'm there and I'm happy. And then you do. Yeah. And so it really is like, it's tried and true. It's not just lip service to do that. Like,
and it's not this idea of like, positive thinking. Mm-hmm. Oh, if I just positive think, it's going to all work. No. It's much, much deeper than that. And I think that it's about understanding thought manifestation and energy. You know what I'm saying? Because energy is palpable and it's very real. And if I were to be looking at our project or looking at what we're trying to do with this negative half glass empty, because that is also a reality if you want to look at it that way, then that's what we'll get out of it, But if we really make a conscious decision and a deliberate decision and an intentional decision to have a one-minded idea about what we're trying to create and the intention of literally why we're doing it. Like it's not just about us making music. It's not just about hitting the stage. It's about what are we trying to serve through this music? Who are we trying to serve through this music? And how do we want the impact to be felt? That requires consistency, discipline, and dedication. And you can't move off of it. You can't.
And I think I want to add on to that too, that sometimes intention and impact aren't always the same. Mm-hmm. And so it's nice though, when you have your intention so fully realized in yourself, that I think it makes the impact and the intention align better. Yeah.
Prana, tell me about how you grew up.
Man, I had a very nomadic childhood. Whenever people ask me like, where are you from? I never really know how to answer that because like I was born in Atlanta and then we moved back to California, but then we went back to Atlanta. We went to New York. We went to Cambridge, Massachusetts, did a very brief stint in Italy. Then we ended up in Nashville and we also went back to California again during all of that. Yeah. And so I just like got to experience, and that's just like places I've lived, places I've got to visit is a whole nother story. So I'm really grateful that was the experience I had growing up, which is being a very like the only kid in the room full of adults. That was very much my life. And it was funny because, my family would often call me an old soul, and I did not feel that until I think I was like maybe 17 or 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And I was like trying to figure out where I wanted to go to college. And so I did this like brief little summer college program at the Academy of Arts University in San Francisco. And like, it's probably the most time I had spent around other teenagers in a really long time because I had been homeschooled in my junior and senior year of high school. And so I had mainly been around adults. And then like, I spent a lot of time with my yaya, who's my grandma. And so I'm like walking into this room and there's like all these kids in there and we're like hanging out, whatever. And this like guy walks in that everyone loves. And so he comes in and they're all like, David. And then I go, Norm, which is a Cheers reference. And then everyone just looked at me like his name is David. And I was like, no, I was talking about Cheers, where everyone knows your name. And they just all looked at me like, okay.
We don't know what that is.
So that my childhood was very much that, just being like the old person in this young body. And also a lot of exposure, of course, to music. I didn't realize just how big of an impact my dad and my mom had on the world, honestly, until I was in high school. Because I don't know, to me, it was just like, oh, my parents did music. Like everyone's mom hosts jam session parties that go until the sun comes up and like spends their days in the studio and has, been on tour buses. I was just like, this is just my normal. And I didn't realize until high school how much like even my generation felt the impact of Wu-Tang until I would see like kids wearing Wu-Tang shirts. And I was like, how do you know that? How do you know that? That's for older people. But it was like, oh, wow. Like their impact is real, which is so funny. A child's perspective on their parents is just like, I don't know. My dad makes beats in his room and my mom writes songs in the living room. Like, I don't know what you want me to say, but I there was only one time, I think when I was like 15, that I kind of felt like, dang, I wish my parents had given me a more grounded childhood, because so many of the friends I had known each other since kindergarten and had like lived in the same house their whole life. And that was just like not an experience that I had ever had. And so I don't even want to say jealous, because that's not in my personality, but more so like mournful that was something that I didn't get to experience. And once now I'm 21. So being into this like phase of my early adulthood, I have gotten to really appreciate again, like, wow, no, it's such a blessing that like I got to be in Europe when I was 14, just gallivanting around and going to Morocco at a young age and just experiencing so many different cultures and so many different people, because I think it made me more compassionate and more empathetic and more able to be in any room and relate. Or you don't always have to relate to someone. Sometimes it's just nice to hear someone else's life and be like, oh, this is all new information to me. Tell me more about that. I think that's the most interesting part about being around different people. It's like, I have no grasp on what your life was like, So,
just for people who are listening, your father is the RZA from Wu-Tang. I didn't mention that in the intro. And, there's a lot of expectation that gets put on children who are of musical, icons or successful musicians. And your father is one who's very, very successful. And a lot of times the expectation is for, if you're Bob Marley's son, that you've got to be the next king of reggae or something like that. Or, if you're Elvis's daughter, you've got to be doing what Elvis did. And I want to hear about both of your musical journey to making the music that you do today. And I know it's been labeled Americana or at times folk, a little bit country, but I don't hear it as being one thing. I see it as being something that's, very organic based, guitar, drums, bass, keys. And yet it's really just, I would describe it as storyteller music. You're telling the songs of your life and your values, but just tell me, like, how does someone go from 36 chambers to what you guys do?
Yeah, I think it's, so we always talk about this in like hip hop versus country. And I've been saying a lot recently that hip hop and country are probably the two most American genres, because they're really about the American experience. They're just kind of from like these two different viewpoints of it. And so I feel like it was such a natural progression actually for us to come from hip hop to country. Because if you look at, 36 Chambers, for example, that's like, those are stories being told through and through. That's storytelling music. When you look at Johnny Cash's music, you're like, that's storytelling music through and through. So it's like, really, what's the true difference between these two? Maybe one has more 808s than the other, but I feel like even the evolution, like you see country now and it's very much in this pop space. And that's the same with hip hop right now. It's kind of taken this, it has a very pop, it's a little more clean than hip hop used to be.
Sure.
And so I feel like it just made sense for us wanting to do something organic, that it would be like, oh, well, when you just add more live instruments to it, it sounds a little more country. That's why it's like you said, it's not really just country or just Americana or just folk. It's so many of these other things. And I think hip hop is like innately a part of our culture. And so it was going to be like tearing my limb off to make me not have some of that hip hop values within me. Same with mom. So coming to it was just like, okay, you know, what if we had a acoustic guitar? What if we did have like violin? Because mom loves string. You know.
Well, and that really was a conscious decision, because we were coming from hip hop and Wu-Tang specifically, and me with my history, and then her being the daughter of. When she, and I'll let her tell the story about how the project actually came to be, so you can get the funny in that, because it's pretty hilarious actually to me. But when we did kind of come together and say, okay, we're going to do this, I told Prana, I said, well, listen, you know, did you have an idea of what kind of music you want to make, you know, together? And she was like, no, I just don't care. I just want to make music with you. And I said, okay, well, then I'll kind of lead the charge on that. We have to completely stay away from straight ahead hip hop, soul, R&B. We have to stay away from that, you know, only because we have so much attachment already to it. And I want people, the listener, whether it's labels or whether we're independent, like the market, I want them to actually give us a chance to see us outside of Wu-Tang Clan, hip hop music, outside of the genres, and allow us to just create with more freedom and more authenticity, and give us the chance to even figure out what the brew is. You know what I mean? What are we making together? And with that being said, I wanted everything to be live. I wanted to make sure that we recorded almost like old school 70s style, you know, like all live, stripped down, upright basses, banjos, fiddles, mandolins, acoustic guitar, obviously, African percussion. Like that's what I kept hearing. And Prana and I were always singing a cappella together since she was a little girl. We've been singing together, but never with music, maybe with some African percussion, but generally a cappella. So even that always had like this kind of folky kind of rub to me. So that's where we leaned in. And it wasn't until we came to Nashville that people were like, no, that's country. And they were like, no. And then a whole different group would say, no, it's Americana. And then another group would say, no. It started to be like a battle. And I was like, how about you guys say whatever, call it whatever you want to. We're just going to keep developing and see what shapes up, you know.
Hey, you know, the Stay Human podcast is all about the idea that there's no one you wouldn't love if you knew their story. Well, the same thing goes for our sponsor, Pact. I just know you're going to love this company as much as I do once you learn all about what they're doing for the planet and for humanity. Recognized as being Earth's favorite clothing company, Pact is on a mission to change the historically, you know, quote unquote, dirty business that is the fashion industry. They source premium organic cotton, partner with safe, fair trade factories, minimize plastic use, offer green shipping, and even use 81% less water to make their clothing. And the result is comfortable, clean, everyday wear that puts people and the planet first. You can shop styles for women, men, kids, babies, even bed and bath products too at wearpact.com. Once you're there, use my code, which is STAYHUMAN, all capital letters, for 20% off your first order. Just head over to wearpact.com. That's wearpact.com. Was country music ever in either of your households?
Yes, in my father's household, and that's when they were calling it country western more so. My grandmother on my mother's side, so my grandmother Miranda, and my father really loved country music, and you know, and I'm talking about like Patsy Cline, Johnny Cash, Crosby, Stills, and Nash. oh my gosh, who else can I think of? Dolly, of course. And what's funny is when we got here, and when we met our manager, her name is Renee Bell, and she would ask me, okay, well, have you heard of this? You guys kind of reminded me of this and reminded me of that. And I'd be like, I don't know these people. And then she'd like hum a verse or kind of like say a lyric or something, and I'd start singing it. So I have these songs that are stored in my head that I don't know whose songs they really are, but they obviously have penetrated and left a very memorable mark. So I don't have, and I think that's one of the things I was conscious about and coming into the genre, into the market here in Nashville, as I really wanted people to understand how much I value the music and value that part of the history, because the history goes prior to that as well, which I think is important too, that we're trying to kind of dispel the myth that country music isn't also Black music, isn't also Black American music, isn't also, you know what I mean? We kind of got pushed out, We're not trying to come back and take over anything. Like we are creating, and it's one of the things that I wanted to make clear when we got here was like, look, we don't have a stronghold in the history. You're not going to be able to throw a song at me and I'm going to go, oh yeah, I know exactly who that is. That's just not the truth, and I prefer to be honest about that and show the respect that I have for the creators, but also that we're here to do what we do naturally, and that it's truly coming from our heart. It's not anything, we didn't look at the market and go, let's try to make that kind of music. It's just not what happened.
Prana, what did you grow up listening to?
I grew up listening to obviously a lot of hip hop, a lot of soul, but like 70s soul for sure, a lot of jazz music, a lot of rock, a lot of like alternative music, which I feel like alternative is such a broad title, but like Mom was playing a lot of Bjork and Fiona Apple and Sheryl Crow and Alanis Morissette while I was growing up. So like, and also Hole. So yeah, a lot of that. And yeah, Queens of the Stone Age, that's definitely more like rock, straight desert rock.
Yeah.
And I think country was probably our like least listened to genre, but like it was still like sprinkled in there. I always say, for me, the first country song I remember is Before He Cheats by Carrie Underwood. Like to me, that is like when I was like, this is a country song. I don't know what she's talking about, but I love it. So I'm very new into my relationship with country, but it's been so nice being here in Nashville and kind of having, the friends who are like from the South be my like country teachers and like putting me on to like all the things that I didn't grow up with that they got to, which is also a really fun thing about my generation. I feel like we're kind of moving away from I like every genre but country. I feel like we're moving into every genre has something to offer me. So why close myself off from anything?
Tell me about how this project came to be.
Yeah. So basically, Mom used to host these huge jam session parties. She's been like hosting these my whole life since I was like 2 years old. And she had musicians, of course, and poets and visual artists, and the whole gambit of artistic people would come over, and these things would rage on until the sun was coming up. And it was like literally the highlight of my childhood. And it's one of those things where I'm like, when I become a mom one day, I'm also doing that for my kids. And Mom wasn't and isn't the kind of parent that's like, lock the kids in the room, while we do our adult stuff, or like, be seen and not heard. Mom has never been that kind of parent. So like, for me, I really got to like be there and jam out and have this experience like just artists creating freely. So one of the last ones she had hosted before we moved to California, I was 14 years old and came as usual. Mom and I would style something together. And I still can't remember like why this moment really had impacted me so much. But the morning after, I decided that I was going to come to her and like bring this idea to her. And mind you, Mom and I are not morning people, no, even a little bit. Like when we try to talk to each other before 12 o'clock, it's dicey. Like honestly, and even I know I'm like, it is the morning. You're only grumpy because it's the morning. Don't be rude. But it's like, I can't even help it. I'm just like, why are we talking? Why is this happening right now? And so knowing all of this information, I still was like, nah, let me try to have a full conversation with her at like 10 a.m. This will go perfect. And so I come up to her, and mind you, like there's still some people at the house because they're too drunk to go home, and mom, of course, like confiscated keys and stuff like that. None of that drunk driving. And mom had made breakfast for everyone, and so like I come up to her and I'm like, mom, I have a great idea. What if we sang and wrote our own songs together? And she says, no, why? Like zero hesitation, just shuts me down, and I was like,
yeah.
What do you mean? So she's like, if you want to do music, I can help you. Do that by yourself. You're down, I can help you. And I was like, that's not what I said. I said I wanted to sing and write songs with you. And then
she was upset, Michael. She was so upset. If you get her little just appalled.
And I don't know, like mom is a parent that says no. So I'm not unfamiliar to being turned down for something, but for some reason, I did not take that rejection well at all. And I threw like a full-blown temper tantrum. I was slamming doors. I like was like kicking and screaming my legs on my bed. I was like really beside myself. Not a proud moment. I try my best not to have emotional outbursts, and I would say they're far and few between.
For sure. Oh, yeah.
I'm checking. I'm like,
she said, hold on, am I right? No.
And so
even to this day, you're not a hyper emotional person.
Right.
Like it's all within reason.
And so I finally, because I'm like inconsolable, really. Mom is like trying to talk to me, but I'm just like, am I not good enough to work with you? Like, I'm just really, she like attacked my character when she said no. And so I finally like calmed down. I'm able to gather my thoughts and speak more coherently. And I was like, okay, well, just explain to me why you want to do this in the first place. I was like, well, because like you're my best friend, and I like just want to work with my best friend. She was like, okay, yeah, I understand that. And then also I was explaining to her that like, you know, all the time I had spent around her and dad, I saw how vulture like the music community can be, especially to young women who are just like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and just want to make music because they love it so much. And I knew, like even at 14, that there'd be no person that would protect me better than my mom, especially because she's not trying to live vicariously through her child. This isn't like a momager dynamic, because mom is doing and has been doing music for my entire life. So it's like, she doesn't need to live through anyone. She's living her dream right now. And so once I explained like all of that to mom, she was like, okay, all right, I understand. It was like, we can do it, but I have stipulations and things you need to do. So obviously I was in 9th grade at the time when I bring this idea up, and she's like, I was in every extracurricular I could possibly be involved in. And she's like, you need to still do all of those. You need to keep your 3.8 or higher at school. And when you get home, we're going to rehearse as if we have a show. And so,
and she wasn't homeschooled at this time. She was she was in traditional school at Long Beach Poly. Yeah, in Long Beach. Okay.
So that was kind of like, that was the conversation that got one started, and then it kind of like took on this life of its own in terms of like from 2015 to 2020, we were really just trudging along, working on like, okay, who do we want to work with? What are our sounds? What's the Nashville music scene like? Completely unfamiliar with Nashville. I had certainly never been there. And mom had maybe been there a couple times on tour, right, which is basically not being there, exactly. You know? And so
hotel room, stage, after party, bus.
Exactly.
Or airport.
Exactly. And so from in that like span of time, I got to go on tour as like a working artist for the first time. Did like 150 dates. Yeah, 150 dates. I was 16 at the time, youngest person like older. The next person older than me was 23 at the time, or 24. And
it's a musical.
Yeah, it was a musical.
Love Jones the musical that toured the nation.
And what else? We really got into like me songwriting more. I'd always written songs, but like the song that 10-year-old Prana was writing is very different than 16-year-old Prana and then 18
Sure.
and then 21. And so just like really doing my, 10,000 hours, as my dad likes to say, trying to be like, okay, what does a real song structure look like? And then once 2020 came around and mom had finished up her solo project and was like, okay, we're doing this, like full steam ahead. And we're giving it everything that we've got.
Well, and I gave her my word that when I finish this solo project, I have partners in Paris that I work with, and a Moroccan-born singer-songwriter producer named Ahmed Sultan, who I do a lot of work with. And I promised her when I finished that project and handed it in at the top of 2020, I would put all my energy into O.N.E The Duo, because she will have been 2 years out of high school at that point. Like, it was very important to me that I needed her to graduate, be fully 18, like on the other side of 18 before we really kicked it up a notch. I needed to take her on tour to see how she could manage the responsibility of, at that time it was school, but for me, it was just the responsibility of life and then also the road. And I needed to see how she kind of fared therein. So that's why we went on that tour. The opportunity came up and it was just like right on time. It was perfect because she was homeschooling at the time anyway. So it worked out. But that was one of the prerequisites for us to do the project, for me to feel comfortable that I'm developing her in the way that she would need to be developed, so that if she wants to continue on at 20, 23, solo, whatever it is, that she'll have some of this foundation to draw from when I'm going to step to the side and do my own thing or whatever it may be, So it was a big part of me kind of signing on to the project. All of this was a forethought in that day at 14 years old when she was explaining to me the importance of it. I saw the entire vision of like, okay, what will I need to do to prepare her for this? And how joyful can I make it while still showing her that this is a career path. You know what I mean? This is not just making songs. And I needed her to understand that and to have the maturity that comes with age and wisdom and, young adulthood. I just couldn't see us doing it prior to her being 18, not full throttle, So, yeah.
I keep thinking in my mind, the era that we're living in right now, the time in society that we're living in there's so much division in the world right now, politically, along ethnic lines, gender, sexuality, just so many things. And I'm wondering, how do you carry that as Black women into music? And I mean it in terms of like activism and like the large letter A sense of activism of like, things that are happening in the world. But I also mean it in terms of like just personal activism, of the way that you guys are showing up as Black women to inspire not just other Black women, but just inspire people and in general.
I think that's a really good question. I come from the philosophy of I can show you better than I can tell you, kind of vibes. That's why you probably won't find me doing a whole lot of lip servicing about what people should or should not do. A good friend of mine once told me, don't should on everybody. You shouldn't should on somebody too much. It's not really, probably not the best way to go about things, right? And I think as a Black woman, a mother, an artist, and then as Black women together in a unit together, I think speaking for myself, what we're trying to do is show who we are, whether it's when you come around us, you feel this kind of energy where we are open and welcoming and accepting. I hate the word tolerant. Like, there's this idea that people should be tolerant of one another. No, I'm just going to accept you, period.
Yeah.
Period. Like that's the beginning and the end of the sentence. I'll just accept you. And there's nothing that I need to, no idea or philosophy of mine that I need to project onto you to accept you. I can share my philosophy with you and you can share yours with me. And odds are there's going to be something in there that you and your philosophy, as long as it's not, naming children or, there are lines, there's foundation to this. At the same time, there's something in there that I can grab from there to apply to my life, to make my life brighter or to receive more love, a greater experience, more understanding, which also doesn't come sometimes fluffy and nice and peachy. Sometimes understanding comes through going through something, or experiencing something with somebody, or I don't have to necessarily go through it, but I can be empathetic to the person who is having the experience and learn something through that, or go, okay, I might not want to do that thing, that person shared with me. But I think it does come through in who we actually are. And everyone feels it when they come around us. I haven't in my life, I'm not afraid of my age. I'm 48 years old. In my life, there have been very few people who I've come across that I haven't found a reason to love and care for them. There just haven't. And you have to actually do something, and it has to be pretty severe, because normally, even if you do something that's foul, I'm like, oh my gosh, oh honey, I don't know why you would have done that. It's still not about me. You see what I'm saying? It's about whatever the person is experiencing, how they're coming to their existence, right? That's like a half answer, but I think kind of even through the music, we're really trying to infuse this thing with like all are welcome kind of a vibe, even though we're talking about country music, we're talking about Americana music, it's not that. This is a connector. This is a way for us to connect through a shared experience. Could be just through the beat. It could be through the fact that you like that guitar riff and that thing caught you. And now we're in a conversation now, where we have some alignment with one another, some kind of open door for us to spread love, like the actual love vibration. Because that's what it sounds so corny and cliche that love is all we need. No, like for real though. Like for real though. What do I care if you're transgender? What? Tell me more. Help me to understand. It's not hurting me, you being you is not hurting me. Actually, it's creating more of a unique fabric to the world experience, to the human experience. Let's not turn that off or subject anybody to hate and ridicule because of how they are approaching life or how they come to life. I get very sensitive about humanity, and the experiences that we're all having. And that's how I personally come to. And I think that Prana, she exhibits so much wisdom beyond her years in that regard of just being loving and compassionate.
Yeah.
For all.
Prana, your generation is living activism in a whole elevated way from generations past. And how does this show up for you in music?
I feel like our music is more like the foundation. Like it will allow us to have a platform on an even grander scale to help speak out for other people and bring awareness to the many things that are happening. Because sometimes I think that activism for me is as simple as providing a safe space for people. So if that's provided in our music, then that's goal accomplished. Sometimes you just want to hear a song that just makes you happy and makes you feel like, okay, maybe the world's not burning and on fire right now. Other times, I think, especially as a Black woman and in a town and in a genre that isn't super diverse, so it's like you're even more aware that you're a Black woman, is that sometimes your existence is like expected to be activism, if that makes sense. So it's like as a Black woman, as a Black person, you're always having to educate and teach others as opposed to just like being as any other person would. And so I think for me, it's very important that in any space that I'm in, I'm not compromising on what my identity is. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'm in a room and I'm like, I really don't want to explain to you why police brutality is really happening. And other times I'm in a room and I'm like, oh yeah, I'd love to tell you about my experience in the South throughout my childhood and now in young adulthood. And so, and I think activism is this very interesting thing where it's so easy, I think, nowadays, and especially because my generation has like turned it into like a social media movement where now we're like, look how many people we can reach just from our little towns, where it's like we talk a lot about performative activism. And it's interesting because it's like it's the lip service aspect, right? Where it's like I even me as a Black woman, I can say a whole bunch of stuff that I'm for and about, and I can post all day long. But what am I doing at the end of the day with a real human? Like, what am I saying? How am I comforting them? And really, all it takes is one person. If there's one person that you help, that you've healed, that you've been a shoulder to cry on, then you've helped one more person. I think often it can feel so like consuming and inundating, where every time I open my phone, it's like this thing has happened. People don't have enough food, and there's not clean water, and just looking at America itself, you don't have to get into other countries before you start feeling like, oh my God, there's too much to try to fix. And so sometimes I have to reel it back and be like, how can I help someone right in front of me today? And sometimes that's just being like listening to my friends who have had the experience of like coming out to their families and them being shunned by their families, unfortunately, and being like, well, you have my mom and I. Like, my mom is an adopter of my friends 1000%. And so it's like, well, if you want to come over for like a home cooked meal by someone's mama, you can come to our house. And so to me, I'm like, okay, that's my one person. And I'm going to try to get one more person above that, and one more person above that. And I think for us, we've always viewed our music as the foundation to helping more people. And as time goes on, I hope that we're not just known for the songs we've made, or, me being RZA and Takitha's daughter, but just like, oh, wow, Prana started a food program. And now, multiple times a year, kids from all over the state get to come and experience what it's like to grow your own food and where your food comes from and feeding yourself well and all that kind of stuff. So there's many aspects, but I feel like sometimes I just have to start with the one person in front of me and then go there.
Awesome. Thank you. I've got one final question for you, which is, how do you stay human? And what does it mean to each of you to be human, and how do you hold on to it?
I would say the way that I stay human is through compassion and vulnerability. I stay open to people and their experiences. I do not allow my past, experiences or things that may have been hurtful to me keep me from opening myself up and being vulnerable to people, and also remaining compassionate for everyone. Like, and it's a that part is kind of my knee jerk anyway. It's like kind of the space I live in, so that's easy. But the challenge is not becoming a turtle and hiding out, from the world, and hiding from people, but out of fear of being hurt or of not being vulnerable. I stay human by being vulnerable and knowing that truly is my purpose. It's something that I know that the Most High put me on the planet to do that, to reciprocate love. So that's how I stay human, and I stick with it every day. I do it every single day.
I stay human. I love the question too, because it's very esoteric and like can have a million answers. I feel like I stay human by having grace with people, which I think Mom is such a compassionate person, and sometimes I have to work on my compassion. And I think by having grace is one of them, because it's so easy to think, oh, I would never do that. And, I was upset at a friend not too long ago, and I was like going off to my other friends about it. And I was like, I would never. And then I said, actually, let me not say never, because honestly, humans, we're so naturally not always at our best. And so it's not fair that when someone's at their best, you take that as who they really are.
When they're not at their best?
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
It's like, that's just one of the many facets of being a human, is that sometimes you're not always saying the right thing to someone. Sometimes you were insensitive and things of that nature. And so for me, I always try to have grace with myself when I have moments where I'm like, I wasn't proud of that. that was out of character for me. Or other moments with people where I'm like, oh, that hurt. But I'm like, you know what? That's life. And I have grace that we'll move past that, or you'll grow up one day, or, you know, I'll forgive. And sometimes it happens the next day. Sometimes it happens 5-10 years from now. But I think it's so important to just have grace with the fact that that's just life, because I would want someone to have that same grace with me if I acted out of turn.
Yeah. Tell folks what you guys
can I ask you, how do you stay human though? I'm so curious now. I'm so sorry.
You know, well, it changes every day. And, you know, when I think of what it means to be human, it means to be your authentic self, you know, and all of us are, like what both of you said, at times we go through our moods, we go through our changes, we go through our highs and lows, we go through our feelings, and we just like, I really feel like I'm being myself, and I'm able to express it with other people. And other times when we go into that shell and we're just like, I don't know if it's the right time for me to really shine in the way I do. But to stay human is to be able to do that, is to be able to be in that space where you feel free and open and vulnerable to be your authentic self, and then to embrace it in others, to be able to look at somebody else and go, I see you, I get you, and you're completely different from me. Your experience in life is different than who I am and where I came from, but I get you and I see you and I embrace you. And I feel like when we do that, that's how we stay human. That's how we hold on to our humanity, is through our ability to see it in others and to be able to embrace others. So yeah, thanks for asking me.
Yeah.
How can folks find out about what you're doing, and you got any projects that are coming out very soon?
Yeah, well, we just dropped our most recent single, Stuck in the Middle, dropped on June 17th, and shot a video for that as well. So that will be premiering on CMT pretty soon.
Nice.
And you can find our music on Spotify. You can follow us on O.N.E The Duo on IG. Same with YouTube is at O.N.E The Duo, Twitter, everywhere. Everything is O.N.E The Duo. And yeah, anywhere you stream or buy music, you can find us there. We've dropped a few singles. What was it? Guilty was our first single. River of Sins, I think, came next. And then Ain't No Sunshine was a cover that we released. Bill Willer's cover that we dropped back in, what is that, February, January, something like that. And then Stuck in the Middle just came out, like I said, a couple weeks ago. And the album will drop top of the year, first quarter 2023. So February it'll be our treat for Black History Month. Will be the full album. But we wrapped the album already. We're in the mixing lab right now, and it's a chef's kiss for real. Like, I'm so proud of it, and I think the world will be happy that we're getting it out.
I love what I've heard so far, and I can't wait to hear the whole album and to see you guys perform live. I watched some of your live YouTube performances, and they're awesome. It's great to see the chemistry between you guys. And I hope that people who are listening now are curious. Go check out their music on Spotify. Pay attention to when their album drops. Watch for that new video, Stuck in the Middle. And on behalf of Pack Clothing, we just want to say thank you for being on this week's episode of the Stay Human podcast.
Thank you so much for having us. I really enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Safe travels on the road.
Thank you.
Great show tonight. Peace.